Today on Law Review, buying a new home. If you're looking to hit a home run in this season's housing market, you need to cover all your bases. And according to Lexington attorney Gina Ghioldi, the first base you need to cover should be legal. Welcome, Gina.
Thanks for having me.
First of all, the basics. Even an experienced buyer probably needs an attorney, right? Despite what you're told?
I'm not being self-serving when I say the answer is yes. And you can limit the involvement that your attorney has. But again, you want to be very careful because whether you're buying for the first time, you're downsizing, you're buying up, the purchase of a home can be one of the most financially expensive things you ever do, and you can't afford not to be legally savvy.
I know someone who's bought and sold many homes, and his theory is, I may not need it, but it's my insurance policy. We're dealing with thousands and thousands of dollars.
That's right.
For a few hundred or a couple $100. It's a great insurance policy. What about the pitfalls at offer time? When you come to say, okay, this is the house of my dreams, I want it, seems to make sense. What are some of the pitfalls you run into?
Well, some of the things that you have to be very careful of is that offer form. Actually, there are several versions of it out there, and some of them protect buyers more than others.
Really?
So it's a good idea just to sit down with your attorney before you actually go out looking for a home to make an offer and take a look at the language that you want on there. One of the most important things is to make sure that whatever offer you're making is contingent upon an inspection. And that's a full inspection, obviously, of the property for lead paint, for radon, for insects, but be careful that the language states that you have to be satisfied, you as the buyer, with whatever the results are of the inspection, not some material defect. If you don't like anything in it, you could back out of the deal.
So you do that. What are the risks of setting a tight deadline? I got the house, got an offer, accepted the offer, and I really want to get into it soon. What are the risks of setting a tight deadline?
Well, be careful that you leave yourself enough time to get that mortgage. Of course, get the inspections first, to get that purchase and sale agreement, which is the next big legal document. We'll talk about it in a second. And make sure that you have enough time to get a mortgage commitment and get your mortgage to close, because if you miss a deadline, you could be on the hook.
I'll bet if I'm a buyer in a market like this, I have a much better chance of getting contingencies in my offer than I would have a couple of years ago.
Well, that's true, and you can even try to put in there a contingency that you have to sell your own home. Now, a couple of years ago, that was unheard of. And there still might be a lot of sellers out there that say no way, but if you need to sell your own home first, or you want to make that a contingency of the offer, make sure you put it in the offer form, because if you don't, you miss the opportunity later on.
Is everything on the table? I mean, some people might be reluctant to say, boy, I'd like a contingent upon this and this. You can set any contingency, right? They can reject it.
That's right. But the big thing is if you leave yourself open by making sure you've got the contingencies for those inspections and for getting the mortgage, and that's based on the house maybe being appraised at the value that you're offering, then you've covered yourself. Because if you need to back out, you've got the big bases covered.
Unless you're getting the deal of the century, is there any reason to buy a house as is?
Well, if you've done the inspection and you're okay with it and you realize there might be some small defects or problems, it's okay. The key here is to be an informed buyer, both on the legal contract side of things and, of course, on the real estate and the property end of it. Do your homework and make sure that you cover all your bases to begin with.
Gina, you mentioned earlier about the purchase and sale agreement, that there's something we need to watch out for that. What is that?
The purchase and sale agreement is the next big document that usually happens after you've had the inspection. So you make an offer on a home, you typically have your inspections, and then you do a purchase and sale agreement. And that spells out all the details of the transaction. What has to happen before the deal closes, what happens if you or the seller should breach and renege on the deal, what happens to your deposit, who's on the hook for what. So you need to really make sure that you're covered in all those particular areas that are listed on what we call, it's a P&S, also a purchase and sale agreement, and make sure that an attorney has taken a look at it, because there are standard forms out there for a purchase and sale as well. But as a buyer, you want to add certain additional language to protect yourself.
What about that deposit? Is it held by the seller or a third party, an independent third party?
Well, it's got to be held by either the seller's attorney or the seller's broker. Doesn't really matter which, but be very careful and take a look at that language, because if there's a dispute, you don't want that broker or that attorney giving the money away unless everybody agrees in writing or a court orders where the money should go. Be careful, it's your money that's being held.
You might want to have an attorney help you with this process. And that's the thing, is a lot of realtors will tell you you don't need an attorney. And the reality is you probably don't, but boy, you don't want to be the person who did.
No, that's right. And again, it doesn't have to be a big involvement by an attorney, but double checking and knowing what to ask goes a long way.
Okay, great. And we have a website here. This is your website. Tell them about it.
It is. It's www.ghioldilaw.com. We have an article specifically for buyers, what you need to know right on there. And next week we'll talk about the seller's perspective of things.
Equal opportunity session. We'll deal
Absolutely.
with the sellers and what they need to know next
week.
Gina, thank you very much.
Thanks
Great
for
advice.
having me.
All right. A reminder, you can see all the day's news in streaming video on our website. Just go to NECN.com or the NECN pages of Boston.com. That is the online home of the Boston.